Colt was the military's right hand for over 100 years. If you were an American soldier at almost any point between the mid-1800s and the late 1900s, there's a very real chance that a Colt firearm was issued to you. Not a competitor, not an alternative, a Colt. So how does a company that armed the Wild West, both world wars, Korea, Vietnam, and dominated U.S. military contracts for decades lose that position? This is not the story people usually tell about Colt. This is the inside story. Power, the arrogance, the deals, the wars, and the slow collapse that most people never fully connect. And it starts long before the military trusted Colt at all. Before the mid-1800s, guns were not tools of dominance, they were tools of timing. A soldier fired once and then prayed he had time to reload. Muzzle-loading firearms were slow, dirty, and unforgiving. Reloading under pressure meant pouring powder, seating a ball, ramming it down, priming the ignition, all while exposed. If cavalry charged you while you were reloading, you were done. Armies adapted tactics around this weakness. Formations mattered more than firepower. Discipline mattered more than speed. That limitation killed thousands, and one man became obsessed with fixing it. This matters, so don't miss it. Samuel Colt was not a brilliant engineer. He didn't invent the revolver concept. He didn't master metallurgy. What he mastered was selling inevitability. You see, Colt understood something others didn't. If you give a soldier multiple shots without reloading, you don't just give him a better gun, you change his confidence. That confidence wins fights. His idea was simple: a rotating cylinder that indexed itself after every shot. 5 or 6 shots, same trigger, same hands. The military laughed at first. Colt's first company failed hard. In 1836, Colt launched the Patent Arms Manufacturing Company. Revolvers were expensive, the mechanisms were fragile, black powder fouling caused failures. And worst of all, they weren't trusted. Soldiers and civilians asked the same question: why would I need multiple shots when one's always worked? The U.S. government didn't bite. Foreign governments didn't bite. By 1842, Colt was bankrupt. The factory closed, the idea was shelved, and Colt was finished. Or so it seemed. War resurrected Colt. Everything changed because of one man and one war. Captain Samuel Walker of the Texas Rangers had used Colt's early revolvers in real combat. He saw the flaws, but he also saw the future. During the Mexican-American War, Walker needed a sidearm that could stop a charging enemy and their horse. Walker didn't want elegance, he wanted brute force. He approached Colt with a demand, not a suggestion. A massive revolver, 6 shots, heavy caliber, built for war. Colt had no factory, no production line, no money. Walker placed an order anyway: 1,000 revolvers. That order saved Colt's life. The Colt Walker, birth of a military trust. The Colt Walker revolver was a monster. Too heavy for the belt, too powerful for comfort, but devastating. For the first time, the U.S. military saw the tactical value of sustained handgun fire. One soldier could now fire 6 times without stopping. That mattered. The Colt Walker didn't just win contracts, it changed doctrine. Colt used the profits to build a permanent factory in Hartford, Connecticut. This is where Colt truly became dangerous. Colt didn't just arm the military, he industrialized it. Here's the part most people skip. Colt revolutionized manufacturing. Before Colt, guns were handmade, parts were unique, repairs required craftsmen. Colt introduced interchangeable parts, precision tooling, assembly line production. For the military, this was gold. It meant faster mass arming, standardized training, easier logistics. The U.S. military didn't just buy Colt guns, it bought into Colt's system. That relationship would define American warfare for generations. Colt and the expansion of America. By the late 1800s, Colt firearms were everywhere. Civil War revolvers, frontier sidearms, Army contracts. When America expanded westward, Colt expanded with it. The single-action Army revolver, the Peacemaker, became iconic not because of movies, but because of adoption. The military trusted it. Lawmen trusted it. Settlers trusted it. Colt was no longer proving itself. Colt was established. And this is where the danger began. Confidence turns into complacency. Colt learned a dangerous lesson. They didn't need to innovate constantly. They just needed to deliver what the military already loved. For decades, that worked. But war doesn't stop evolving, and Colt slowly stopped leading. By the late 19th century, Colt was no longer chasing the military. The military was built around Colt. This distinction matters more than anything else in this story. Colt firearms weren't just weapons issued to soldiers. They shaped how soldiers were trained, how units were organized, and how battles were fought. When officers thought about sidearms, they thought Colt. When procurement officers wrote contracts, Colt was the default. That kind of dominance does something dangerous to a company. It makes winning feel automatic. The Peacemaker era, Colt at full power. In 1873, Colt introduced what would become one of the most influential firearms in history, the single-action army revolver, later known as the Peacemaker. This gun didn't just serve the military, it became part of American mythology. Chambered in .45 Colt, reliable, powerful, and mechanically simple, the Peacemaker was exactly what 19th century warfare demanded. It handled dirt well, it worked under stress, it didn't require delicate handling. The U.S. Army adopted it, and once the Army adopted it, everyone followed. Colt revolvers saw service in the Indian Wars, Spanish-American War, and countless frontier conflicts. By the time movies romanticized the Old West, Colt had already locked itself into American identity, and that was the problem. The death of Samuel Colt and the shift in culture. When Samuel Colt died in 1862, leadership passed on, eventually to his wife, Elizabeth Colt, who ran the company successfully for years. But something intangible was lost. Samuel Colt had been paranoid, hungry, aggressive. Later leadership focused on protecting success instead of chasing the next breakthrough. This difference would haunt Colt for generations. Enter John Moses Browning, Colt's greatest asset and hidden weakness. At the turn of the 20th century, firearms technology was changing again. Revolvers were reaching their limits, smokeless powder changed ballistics, self-loading mechanisms became viable. One man stood above all others, John Moses Browning. Browning was a true inventor, the opposite of Colt's modern culture. He designed semi-automatic pistols, machine guns, shotguns, rifles. Colt didn't create Browning's designs, they licensed them. And in 1911, that decision saved the company again. The M1911, a military marriage that lasted 74 years. The M1911 pistol was everything the military wanted. Powerful .45 ACP cartridge, semi-automatic operation, rugged steel construction. When the U.S. Army adopted it, Colt regained unquestioned dominance. The M1911 fought in World War I, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. 74 years of service. The next leap in military firearms didn't come from Colt. It came from Eugene Stoner. Stoner's AR-15 design was radical. Lightweight aluminum construction, small caliber, high-velocity ammunition, modular design. This rifle broke every rule old manufacturers believed in. Colt initially hesitated, then they saw the opportunity. Instead of building their own next-generation rifle, Colt bought the rights, again. Colt believed the military needed them more than they needed the military. This belief shaped every bad decision that followed. Colt priced aggressively. They resisted manufacturing modernization. They ignored efficiency. Why change when contracts kept coming? Because contracts don't last forever. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, production delays increased, labor disputes became frequent, costs rose. Other manufacturers modernized, Colt didn't. The military noticed, and for the first time in a century, Colt faced something unfamiliar: competition. The U.S. military opens the doors. The Pentagon grew tired of missed deadlines, high prices, and flexibility. Contracts were opened. Colt assumed legacy would protect them. It didn't. FN Herstal enters the picture. Belgian manufacturer FN Herstal modernized faster, produced cheaper, delivered reliably. And the unthinkable happened. The U.S. military awarded major rifle contracts to someone else. This moment shattered Colt's illusion of permanence. For the first time, Colt wasn't essential. By the time the Vietnam War escalated in the 1960s, Colt appeared untouchable. On paper, they had everything. The M16 rifle contract, deep Pentagon relationships, a century of military trust. But Vietnam would expose something Colt had never been forced to confront before: scale. Vietnam changed the rules of military manufacturing. Vietnam wasn't like previous wars. It was long, it was resource draining, and it demanded consistent, high-volume production under brutal conditions. The U.S. military needed rifles fast. They needed replacement parts faster. They needed reliability in mud, rain, and jungle heat. The M16, Colt's crown jewel, entered combat under pressure, and the rollout was messy. Instead of seeing Vietnam as a warning, Colt treated it as confirmation of dominance. Why? Because despite the issues, the contracts kept coming. Colt learned the wrong lesson. They believed the military had no alternative. Switching suppliers was too risky. Legacy guaranteed loyalty. This belief shaped Colt's internal culture for decades. Inside Colt, the company stopped acting like a competitor. For the 1970s, Colt no longer behaved like a company trying to win contracts. It behaved like a company managing entitlement. Manufacturing plants aged, processes stagnated, labor relations deteriorated. While other arms manufacturers invested in CNC machining, lean production, quality control systems, Colt leaned on history, and history doesn't pay penalties for late delivery. Labor strikes and internal chaos. Colt's Hartford factories became unstable. Labor unions and management clashed repeatedly. Strikes shut down production lines, and deadlines were missed. For civilian customers, this was inconvenient. For the U.S. military, it was unacceptable. Wars don't wait for labor negotiations. Every missed shipment chipped away at trust. For decades, the question had been, how many rifles can Colt deliver? Now the question became, who else can deliver them? That shift is everything. By the 1980s, the U.S. military was no longer willing to tolerate production delays, cost overruns, outdated facilities. The Pentagon opened rifle contracts to competition. Colt's response? Complacency. They assumed their name alone would carry them. They were wrong. FN Herstal, a Belgian manufacturer, offered modern factories, competitive pricing, reliable output, and they delivered. When FN won major U.S. military rifle contracts, it sent a shockwave through the industry. Colt wasn't furious, they were confused. They'd never truly competed before. Colt didn't lose because of a single bad rifle. They lost because they believed the military needed Colt more than Colt needed the military. That belief infected decision-making. Slow innovation, defensive politics, resistance to change. The military noticed, and it remembered. Colt doubles down on the wrong strategy. Instead of modernizing aggressively, Colt did something fatal. They focused inward. Legal fights, contract disputes, protecting trademarks. They tried to own the past instead of building the future. Other manufacturers learned fast. Modular rifles, faster production cycles, civilian market synergy. Colt stayed rigid. The military didn't. While Colt obsessed over military exclusivity, the massive civilian firearms market was growing. AR-style rifles exploded in popularity. Civilian shooters wanted affordable, modular, customizable rifles. Smaller manufacturers stepped in. They innovated. Colt hesitated. And when Colt finally acted, they made the worst decision in company history.